Welcome back to Inside Sources. Today I'm leading the show with a conversation on some of the dynamics that we are seeing and hearing regarding 2027, even looking at the global dimensions of it, and then a discussion indeed about some of the things that has happened in the US regarding Nigeria. To join me in that very important conversation is a US-based Nigerian lawyer who has been a long-standing democracy and human rights advocate. He's actually the winner of the Federal Government Award of Merit to Nigerians in Diaspora. I'd like to welcome back to Inside Sources, Mr. Emmanuel Ogebe. Emmanuel, good to see you again.
Always a pleasure to be here, Lau.
All right, Emmanuel, I'm going to tie you back to some of the things you did in this country before you left, your involvement in national affairs, and therefore use that to ask you this question because you are very familiar with both of them. The campaigns of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu and the campaign team, I'm talking about the teams now, of former Vice President Atiku, they've been making a big deal about corruption, calling each other names. The Atiku campaign said, well, look, we've sent to members of the U.S. Congress and to the White House, the details about Mr. Tinubu's case in the U.S. And of course, the Tinubu camp responded and said, well, the Americans know about the William Jefferson's case, Halliburton, and all of that. You are familiar with all these issues and these people. What's your take on this, Emmanuel?
Well, it's interesting that the reason why our presidential elections are internationalized is because of the weak rule of law at home in Nigeria. If people have been held accountable for their actions in Nigeria, we would not need to be going to foreign fora to pursue some kind of accountability. But the fact of the matter is this. Both President Tinubu and Vice President Atiku have legal messes in the US. And both of them were related to money laundering. In the case of Atiku, he was never charged in court. What happened was that the US Congress did a comprehensive investigation about illicit foreign funds, and Atiku was used as the primary case study. And I believe the amount involved was about $40 million or so. And they were saying that, he had a wife who was living here.
Yes.
And she had a charity. So, a lot of funds were coming in and going out. And ultimately, she left the US. And Atiku himself stopped coming to the US. So that is what is on record, a legislative record. It's not a criminal record. Now, when you talk about the Jefferson case, where Congressman Jefferson actually ended up in prison,
yes,
I was consulted on that case by Jefferson's team. I know the facts of that case. Atiku was not the target in that case. It was Jefferson. And Jefferson claimed to have collected money that he was going to give Atiku as a bribe. And I think it was $100,000.
Yeah.
From reading the case, I knew that it was fake. Atiku can dash you $100,000. He cannot collect $100,000 for you, from you. So it was the Jefferson, the congressman, who was the primary target and who was convicted. Now, when we go to Tinubu's case, his case is different in the sense that there was an actual court proceeding by the Department of Justice against him, also for money laundering. But this did not involve illicit inflows from Nigeria or corruption money. It involved illicit drug finances. So both cases have been well documented in the US system, one in the judicial system, one in the legislative system. And it's interesting that because Nigeria doesn't hold its leaders to account, now they have to fight in the US about all of this. But let me throw in something else interesting for you. Even though Peter Obi has no criminal case in the US, he's spotless. Guess what? His vice presidential candidate, Kwakwanso, recently became a subject of interest in the US Congress and is being blacklisted, for religious persecution. I think that was an unfortunate call. Kano is a very, very problematic state for religious freedom. But I think that Kwakwanso should not have been the ideal person to have been cited. But those are my quick thoughts on that.
Yeah, so let me just take it from the Kwakwanso end, because Kwakwanso said a few days ago, actually on our channel, to say that they've removed his name from that list. Are you aware whether that has in fact happened?
I'm not aware that that has happened, and we will check, with our contacts in Congress. But you know how, bicameral legislatures work. One house proposes a bill, and then the other brings its own counterparts, and they reconcile. So it is possible that on the Senate side, they decided not to include his name in the reconciliation process. I know that some of us were trying to push that in the Senate side, they should include temporary protective status for Nigerians, and they should include resettlement for Nigerian refugees. So in that mix, a lot of things can happen. Things can be added, things can be removed.
Okay.
So we'll check to confirm.
Okay, and we're going to come to that broad issue. But so I wanted to ask you that in terms of the choices that are before the Nigerian people, and in terms of what ought to be the winning argument, you have been a democracy activist yourself, and human rights activist, and all of that, and a lawyer, and you're based in Washington, D.C. What do you think is, what does it, and you made a point that it's because the rule of law in Nigeria is not as entrenched as it ought to be. But in terms of the narratives that these teams are pushing, do you think it's smart of a narrative for either teams, Tinubu and Atiku, to be pushing corruption charges against each other? Do you think that's a smart move by either of them?
I don't know whether it was Fela who sang a song. I think it was "You Be Thief, I No Be Thief" or something like that.
Yeah.
We have a kettle and a pot, contesting against each other. Which one is blackest at the bottom? And, that is a distraction. Look, let me put this very starkly. When Tinubu was governor of Lagos, he essentially bought off the state. When Atiku was vice president, he essentially bought off a lot of state resources. So anything one accuses one of, the other has his other finger pointing at them as well. And for me, the situation here is very clear. Out of the entire 36 governors who are seeking a second term, if you want to count those who have performed so well that their re-election is not in doubt, you will start with Labour Governor Oti. Can you imagine? He is a one-state governor. In other words, Labour has no other state. And their only state governor. Already in Abia State, people are asking if his wife can run in future, so that when he finishes, she will continue for him.
Wow.
You need to understand, in Igbo land, they have a terrible track record of governance. And this man has already made such a mark that he is being returned virtually unopposed. If Tinubu and others had performed in such a manner, they will not need to be trading insults on who is a thief or who is not a thief. The fact of the matter is that there has been systemic governance failure. And the Tinubu who revolutionized Lagos, we have not seen his fingerprint or his footprints in his governance of Nigeria in the past 3 years. This is why they are fighting on distractions.
Interesting. The song you had referenced, indeed, is Fela. You be thief, I no be thief. You be robber, I no be robber. You be having robber, no be having robber. Argument. It's because I find it so destructive and completely ingenious that is what presidential campaigns in Nigeria has become. But let's move along by asking you, where do you think US-based Nigerians and Nigerians in diaspora, where do you think they are? How are they perceiving all of this ahead of 2027?
Well, as you know, the diaspora has become more and more energized and more interested in politics in Nigeria, even though we've been denied the vote. I have said before that we're the most politically disenfranchised people, despite being the most economically advantaged people. we remit $22 billion to Nigeria every year, which is more than, what is generated by NNPC. So Nigeria's greatest value is its people more than its oil. Yet we do not have the right to vote. But you will recall that, of course, APC brought Nigerian politics into the US because there were you people held town halls and so on and so forth during the Buhari run of 2015, and of course in 2023 Obi had massive town halls. I think he had about 7 town halls across North America in a period of 1 week. So the diaspora has become very interested. I think that the momentum of the diaspora was towards Obi the last time. This time around, I don't know what it will be. But again, we don't have votes here, so our impact might be might be very limited.
Okay, so let's move along to the global dimensions of the 2027 Nigerian election, especially the presidential election. I am aware that some congressmen like Radi Moore and other insinuations around White House and the Congress, we've been hearing that they are going to be paying attention to what is happening in Nigeria. I think Radi Moore was reported to have even said the U.S. wants to be sure that there's going to be a free and fair election. I wanted to ask you, Emmanuel, I mean, you are based there. What are you hearing? What are you seeing in terms of the attention the Americans, government and people are paying to 2027?
Yeah, so I would say that before now, there had not been much talk about the elections. The focus was on the Christian genocide. The focus was on CPC. That was end of last year when the president announced the designation. But more recently, people are beginning to talk about the elections. And here's why it is interesting. I can tell you for free that the Obama administration was very interested in the emergence of Buhari. We know the facts behind that. Now, in 2023, very interestingly, I was involved in some of the election observation. The US said that election was fraudulent and flawed, but they turned around and sent a delegation, a high-level delegation for the inauguration of a flawed election. So they were speaking from two sides of the mouth. Absolutely. Now, I think I've said this on your show before. The fact of the matter is that the Democratic government actually gave Tinubu a lot of cover. And there are 2 primary reasons why the US gave him a lot of cover. One was that because of that case he had in Chicago, he was vulnerable. There are some people who believe, he is an asset and all of that. I'm one of those who will say that is very likely. Cases of that nature, the US government will settle with you so that you give them something in return. They did that with Shagori. Shagori was under prosecution for injecting Nigerian money into elections and elected people here. A congressman is in prison now in America for having taken Shagori's money. And the US government decided not to prosecute him. And they said in the court documents that he cooperated with them on certain matters. So as a courtesy, they are stopping this prosecution. That is how they operate. You used to be here. You know how it is. So what I believe is the second reason why they gave him cover is because of his pro-democracy history. Like I said, he has relations going back many years. And so some of the people involved, and he knows who I'm talking about, marketed him to the US and said, look, we've known this Bobo for long. Whether you like him or not, he knows how to do things. Let us just back him. And so that regime, the Democrat regime that gave him cover, has left. And for the first time, he finds himself very vulnerable on the US side. And that is why, when you look at what has happened in Venezuela, where Trump said that the election was rigged and decided to take them out, there's reason for concern. Now, let me add something. As you know, in the past week or so, there have been pronouncements on Nigeria in the US Congress. There have been amendments tying aid to freedom of religion and all that. It came immediately after Tinubu announced again that his running mate will be Shetima. In other words, he's maintaining a Muslim ticket, in violation of the balancing principle in Nigeria, But even worse, we know Shetima's antecedents. So I don't know who misadvised him to bring the person who was most noted for the security failures and recklessness that allowed Chibok abductions to happen, and you make him your running mate when they are telling you that you've not been taking insecurity seriously. So again, that was a disaster, and you can see there was immediate reaction here as a result of that.
Okay, but in defense of the president and the vice president Shetima, the president argues that it's going to be a political suicide for him not to recognize that the North have a Muslim majority. And in defense of the vice president, people have been saying that if we are to remove him, that will create an in-house, upheaval in the party. So don't you think those factors are also? I mean, since you talk about it, as tough that you have to be careful about.
Again, that is, I think a laughable excuse. He is the president and commander-in-chief. He should not be talking like that at this point. When we all fought for June 12th for Abiola to be president, was it because Yorubas were the majority in Nigeria? No. But we all said, listen, let power shift. If you insist that only Muslims must rule, the Yorubas have Muslims to give them a chance. And that is why we backed Muslim ticket, because we knew that a Muslim Southerner is more liberal, less radical, and less lethal than a Northern Muslim. And that is what the principle of June 12 is. So if the president of Nigeria cannot expand freedom and justice and equality for other Nigerians, then he has annulled and abrogated the legacy of June 12, which he's a beneficiary of.
Okay.
He's a president today because Abiola died for this issue. And he shouldn't now shrink the political space for Northern Nigerian Christians.
Interesting. Now, there has been, I picked this up, the buzz around the party and some of the, hierarchy, that the Northern Christians, especially those of them in the APC, they should get a reward if they are going to throw their support behind the president again. That means the president should also support them in 2031 to have somebody from that part of the country, a Northern Christian, to run for president. If that were to happen, will you consider that a fair, will it be a fair deal, Emmanuel? Because, and I know, I know you are also from the Middle Belt. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so before I answer that, let me also point out that this president currently has over 30 states as members of his ruling party, including Northern Middle Belt states that he lost. He has now co-opted them into the ruling party. So he cannot be saying that, it will be political suicide for him to try and change his VP running mate when he has taken over virtually the entire machinery of the political apparatus of Nigeria. But that said, yes, that proposal has been made that after he rules, he should hand over to a Northern Nigerian Christian. But let me say two things in respect to that. The first is, after Tinubu ruled in Lagos, nobody else has ruled again. Whether we like it or not, nobody else has ruled. Everybody who is there is a caretaker for Tinubu. Okay? I do not see a Nigeria where after Tinubu finishes as president, he will allow anybody else to be there who is not a caretaker. And this is why the takeover of all the parties is happening, of all the states is happening.
But Nigeria is not, okay, make your point. Finish.
Okay, secondly, we're saying that, this is the promise for the future. Was that not the same kind of agreement he had with Buhari? And then when the time came, Buhari sabotaged him. So these kinds of agreements are not enforceable. We would rather have representation now and know that he cares for us than have another 4 years knowing that this man didn't care for us, he didn't reflect us in the system, and we have no assurance that in the future he's going to imbibe us.
Okay.
So it needs to be addressed now.
Okay. Well made. Now, let me make a response to the point about the caretaker and all of that. Do you think, Emmanuel, that Lagos State is the same like Nigeria. Don't you think Nigeria is a different kettle of fish entirely? While it was possible to have Bola Tinubu continue to influence Lagos politics because of the nature of Lagos politics. How do you think that is possible on a prolonged terms in Nigeria with all of the competing forces, both structural and personal?
Yeah, well, that's a very good question. The fact of the matter is this: General Buhari did two things to try and change the political map of Nigeria and ensure northern hegemony. One was bringing in Fulanis from across the sub-region into Nigeria and infiltrating all of the states. In fact, I was shocked to learn just this week that even Bayelsa, the creeks were occupied by Fulanis. So that was part of the strategy, that if they didn't get power, they were going to do whatever they were going to do. But the second thing he did was to build a rail line of $4 billion into Niger to make it possible for Nigerians to come in and vote in Nigerian elections and go back. Now, that structure, who knows how effective it is and how it is going. But what Tinubu has done, which is very interesting, is the takeover of those states. I can assure you, somebody who can control over 30 states in Nigeria is not somebody to be toyed with. Someone who can control Lagos. You even saw that they tried to vote against him, when he was running for president. He still found his way to fight and reclaim Lagos, at least in the governorship, even though he lost in the presidency. Yeah.
Very, very, very interesting points, and quite a lot of expectations are ahead of us in terms of what is going to happen in 2027. But let's move on to some of the letters that we have seen, some of the developments from the United States. Just like you referred to, there is this Florida Congressman, Congressman Gregory Stoop from Florida, who spoke about a bill that will freeze U.S. aid to Nigeria until they believe that there is, that there has been a decline sufficiently of religious persecution. And then right after that, we see the U.S. president writing President Bola Ahmed Tinubu and saying that he's very happy, he's very proud to stand with him in the fight against terror. And of course, the presidency, brought that letter out as a trophy. How do you read those developments? On the one hand, you have the Congress saying that, look, we're going to pass this bill and we're going to freeze further aid to Nigeria until we believe that religious persecution has been dealt with. And then on the other hand, you have the U.S. president replying apparently to a letter from the president saying that I stand with you. What's your interpretation, Emmanuel?
Yes, so I would want to say that the letter is too much ado about nothing. When I was maybe 9 or 10 years old, I wrote a letter to General Buhari as head of state, commending the war against indiscipline and all of that. And he wrote back, Western heads of state or presidents have a system where they respond to letters that people write to them. So it is not magical. But having said that, I will not be non-cognizant of the fact that this has happened before. When Buhari was away in England for several months and he was rumored to be dead, the way Mitch McConnell was rumored to be dead, there was panic in the land. The vice president was doing the best to stabilize the polity. And all of a sudden we heard that Trump had a phone call with Buhari in London. And some of us were shocked because the normal courtesy at that time was the acting president of Nigeria was Osinbajo. If Trump had any business with Nigeria, that's who he should have called, not calling Buhari in the hospital. So we knew that, it was being orchestrated. We have always known that there was an insider who was doing some runs, some private runs, but we've never been able to identify who that person is.
You mean the White House?
Now, yes.
Okay.
Either in the White House or within the Trump circles. So now this has happened again. This letter And it seems to be that those particular forces are the ones who are behind it, because they are giving him a shot in the arm, just the same way they gave Buhari a shot in the arm in the 2017 incident. So I don't think that there's very much significance to it. I think they're overblowing it. Trump will be Trump.
But what about the bill, the U.S. Congress bill that Congressman Gregory Steele spoke about, that it will freeze aid to Nigeria?
Yes.
How do you read that? And what's the progress on that?
Yes, I mean Nigeria has been an annual beneficiary of over $500 million in aid from the US, and that is just speaking about USAID programming alone. When you look at multifaceted programs, including the one that I ran as country rep for the US African Development Foundation 20-something years ago, it's more than $500 million. One project I did that time was a $1 million project with Jigawa State to build 400 houses. So the footprint of American development in Nigeria is massive. Now, with this policy, with the amendment that was made to withhold aid, I think it puts pressure on the Tinubu administration to take this seriously. And I actually think that, the administration is trying in some respects. For example, the Orire kidnappers of the school children were just sentenced a few days ago. Even I couldn't believe it. That is the shortest trial in Nigeria's history. It's the shortest. They were arrested, and the following week they were charged and tried and convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment. Of course, some of us are shocked that Sunday Jackson, who defended himself against a Fulani man, was sentenced to death after detention for 6 months. And then Fulani men who adopted people's children, who beheaded Yoruba teachers, are now given life imprisonment. It's an injustice, but at least the fact that somebody is finally being held accountable, we have to give them kudos. Those of us from the Middle Belt will ask, why this magical speed? Is it because of Trump, or is it because it has finally come to Yoruba land? We have to ask that question.
Well, but just like you said, let's just be thankful that we have something good to say. But I think that if you look at the charges that were preferred against those people, I'm not sure that those three people were directly linked, to the killing. But you've raised a very important question. Let us await clarification. Final question. So this CPC, the country of particular concern designation, how do you think it's going? Now there is, working together between both the American government and Nigerian government. The president wrote a letter, and then the congressman said, look, we are still going to do this. Is Nigeria coming close to a review of the CPC, or how do you see it? And it's good a thing that you reminded us before you answer that question, that you were actually the director general of the U.S. African Development Foundation, if I got it right. We forgotten that so soon, but please go ahead, Emmanuel.
Yes, so the CPC has been recommended again for Nigeria, and the Nigerian government, is taking steps, and they're working with what they call the joint working group with the U.S. to address some of the concerns. But not all of the concerns have been addressed. In fact, unfortunately, they're paying these lobbyists millions, who are confusing issues, who are insulting activists, who are creating more problems for them than resolving. Now, the fact of the matter is this: Nigeria just needs to face up to the reality of what is happening. Recently, a Muslim woman, an Islamic teacher, was on her way to a Islamic preaching event and stopped to ask directions. And then people falsely accused her of being a kidnapper. And she was burnt alive.
Wow.
This is exactly what happened to Deborah Emanuel. And there was no justice for Deborah. The problem is this, as MLK said, injustice to one is injustice to everyone. Injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. Because they were able to get away with killing Deborah Emanuel, now it has gone and visited a Muslim woman as well. So I'm aware that the Nigerian delegation is coming to the US in August for the next round of talks. A US delegation just left Nigeria last week. So there's a lot going on. But what I keep emphasizing to the Nigerian government is they need to engage with us in diaspora so that we can guide the process. Let me add that there's something that is happening which is not right. Nigerians are being arrested here in the US who have not committed any crimes, and they're being deported to Ghana. They're being sent to different countries. So I call on the Nigerian government to sign an agreement with the US for a dignified transfer of Nigerians who want to self-repatriate instead of being detained. I have friends who are currently detained by ICE for no good reason. So Nigerian government should consult with the diaspora. We should engage and forge the path forward so that our country respects human rights and is respected again in the Community of Nations.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel. Before I let you go, can you just give us an update in 30 seconds about the case of those children in Kano State?
Yes. So in Kano State, we went to collect them at the request of the government in April.
And these are orphans. These are orphans, by the way.
Yes, there were 7 orphans who were part of 27 that were taken from a Christian orphanage, put into a Kano State orphanage. Their names were changed to Muslim names, and they were converted. So we have been on their case. Even the US Embassy sent somebody to Kano to sit down with them and managed to release some of them. But we still have 7 remaining. And unfortunately, one of them died in Kano State custody in January. We have pleaded with the Kano State government, return the corpse. They said they want to bury it as a Muslim. We said that is not acceptable. Then they stopped the burial as a Muslim. Oh yeah, release the body, let us bury, and release the other children. Till this day, they have not. After when you are designated CPC, you'll be shouting that it's not fair. How can a state government be acting like terrorists? Even the terrorists and the bandits who took the general, when he died, they returned his body. Why will Kano State not return the body of poor David Tafa, a 13-year-old, since January? These are the issues.
And just for context, so that our audience can understand what we're talking about, these are children that were born to Christian parents. Is that the case?
Yes. Yes. Young girls who gave birth out of wedlock and all of that, they put their children there. Like David Tafa's mother, she's from Southern Kaduna. She's a Christian. She puts her child there, only for Kano to come and take the child away. And then the child died in their hands. So it's not acceptable in any civilized setting for this to go without a response.
Okay, well, we hope that the governor of Kano State, I hope, is following this, because we are also going to keep an eye on this matter. It's a question of religious persecution, because if those children were born to Christian parents, and they are still underage, I think the right thing is to maintain, except they on their own converted, because they are being underage. You have to respect their faith until such a time that they can say that, okay, look, this is the faith that we want to belong to. Thank you so much, Mr. Emmanuel Ogebe, the former director of what was the name of the agency again, just for proper reference?
Country representative.
Country representative of the US Africa Development Agency Foundation, right? Yeah. And that was, like you said, over 20 years ago. But we know him more as a human rights activist, a democracy activist, and also the winner of the federal government's Diaspora Merit Award. Thank you for coming to Inside Sources, and thank you for your views, and thank you for the courage of your conviction.
Thank you, and happy Diaspora Day to all Nigerians.
Happy Diaspora Day. I think that was a few days ago. Thank you so much.